Welcome to Conversations Live, Critical Minerals. Are they a permit to prosperity? We're going to ask that question and hopefully answer it tonight. Hello, I'm Stuart McNish, and you're listening to Conversations Live. Conversations Live is a long-form public affairs dialogue series addressing the big issues of our time. For each episode, we bring together subject matter experts for a deep conversation designed to provide you with information that helps you make more informed decisions. I hope you enjoy it. Tonight we come to you from the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish First Nations, whose people have lived on and continue to call these lands home. OCM. Conversations Live is a long-form public affairs dialogue series that seeks to advance our understanding of the big issues of our times. But we also strive to draw attention to organizations that make a difference in our province. Tonight, I want to introduce you to Helicopters Without Borders, an innovative not-for-profit organization that transports doctors, dentists, and operating facilities to remote Indigenous communities in BC. And when Helicopters Without Borders visits these communities, they team up with another fabulous not-for-profit organization called Backpack Buddies, which delivers food to hungry children. In 2022 and 23, Backpack Buddies delivered more than 1.2 million meals to hungry children in 63 communities in BC. I encourage you, please check out both of these great organizations. And to both of you, thank you for the great work that you do. Now, turning to the focus of this evening, critical minerals. In British Columbia, we have many potential mines. The potential benefits to the province are substantial. But, and this is a big question, will we develop those mines? There are many, many challenges between where we are now, talking about it, and where we want to get to. Will we block the development of these valuable resources because mining is, it's mining? Given Canada's and BC's regulatory and investment landscape, are we in a position where we can attract the needed capital to develop critical mineral mines? Do fluctuations in spot prices affect long-term planning and in particular investment? Will China step in and either prevent the development of these resources here, or will it manufacture a way of securing them for themselves? What role do First Nations and Indigenous businesses play in the development of critical minerals in BC? All of these questions we will be presenting to our amazing panel of experts who will address them and so much more. Joining us remotely on the panel is Heather Exner-Pirot of the Business Council of Canada. You can see her on the screen there. She's in Calgary. Welcome, Heather. On stage are Michael Goehring. Michael is with the Mining Association of BC. John Steen of the Bradshaw Research Institute in Minerals and Mining at UBC. Jeff Hanman of Tech Resources. And Ross Beatty, Equinox Gold. And last but not least, Kirit Jutla of the Association for Mineral Exploration. In addition, we have a number of video clips that we'll be playing from other experts this evening. So we've got an action-packed agenda. Now, just before we begin, I'm going to express my wholehearted, and I mean wholehearted gratitude to the sponsors who make this evening possible. Without their support, this event would not be possible, and you'll be able to see their logos across the screen throughout the evening. Please pay attention to these remarkably generous and thoughtful organizations, because without their support, as I said, this long-form public affairs dialogue series just couldn't happen. Now, one last thing for anyone who's either in the audience in person, or if you're online and you want to pose a question, please go to slido.com, enter the password conversations, and send in your question. Sean Hall, who is our Slido master, will be receiving your questions and bringing them forward to us. Now, we won't be able to get to them all, but I will be able to see the ones that he selects, and they will help to inform me about topics and questions that you will want to have answered this evening. Now, to further set the stage, here is Mario Canseco of Research Co., who just conducted a poll about our attitudes about critical mineral mines in BC. Derek, can I ask you to roll that Mario's video now?
The views of BC residents are evolving at a time of uncertainty related to inflation and with housing concerns reaching areas far beyond Metro Vancouver. Almost half of respondents to our survey say they would rather foster economic growth, even at the risk of impacting the environment, while a slightly smaller number sees matters differently and would rather take care of the environment even at the risk of hampering economic growth. There is a clear gender divide. Men are more likely to side with economic development, while women are keener on reducing environmental impacts. Canada has designated 31 minerals as critical. These minerals include rare earth elements, sometimes referred to as rare earth metals, as well as copper and nickel, among others. More than 2/3 of BC residents are aware of the incidence of critical minerals on items they rely upon every day, with more than 7 in 10 knowing about their use in rechargeable batteries, electric vehicles, and cellular phones. BC residents are not as certain about the use of critical minerals in 7 other products. Fewer than 2/3 know that they are used in components for radar and sonar systems, solar panels, catalytic converters, and guidance systems. Just over half of BC residents are aware that wind turbines, one of the cornerstones in the move to a lower carbon economy around the world, rely on critical minerals to function properly. Practically 4 in 5 BC residents believe mining projects that focus on critical minerals will create jobs, and practically 2/3 think critical minerals are essential to successfully transition into a low-carbon economy. The role of critical minerals in reconciliation is more contentious, with just 3 in 10 BC residents thinking their exploration can play a role in helping Indigenous communities. 7 in 10 BC residents think it is important for everyone to support the mining needed to enable the move towards green technologies. And just over 2/3 think BC has a unique chance to become a major global player on critical metals, a list that has been dominated in recent years by countries like China, India, the United States, and Australia. For 2/3 of BC residents, mining critical minerals locally will shield us from global instability and supply chain disruptions. For Conversations Live, I'm Mario Canseco from ResearchGo.
Thank you, Mario. From his poll results, it appears there is a growing awareness of the benefits of developing critical mineral mines and a growing appreciation to actually allow that development to happen. Now, just before I turn to the panel, I want to play one more video that I believe will help us kick off this evening. Derek, please play the Kim Swansea clip for us.
This is going to continue to be a struggle because obviously there's a balance between being able to source these minerals responsibly, which requires a lot of investigation, a lot of analysis, stakeholder engagement, and so on, with the need to accelerate where there's an opportunity to do it sustainably. So I think that there are opportunities certainly for us to improve and streamline, for example, the permitting process, access to financing, and so on. I think there's opportunities for the market to improve recognition and value of sustainably produced materials on the market. So there's still a lot to do. I think there are demands for anywhere between 2 times to upwards of 100 times of the current supply of critical minerals. And we know that the process for getting these from discovery to market is 20 plus years. So if we're going to be able to obtain the minerals that we need for the energy transition that we aspire to achieve, we're going to have to improve the supply.
Yes, we are. Thanks, Kim. You touched on many of the components that are at the heart of what we're talking about tonight, and you demonstrate that this is a vast, complex, and vitally important topic. One thing for sure, the path to a low-carbon green economy can only be achieved through mining. You cannot get there any other way. Michael, I want to start with you. You represent the mining industry here in BC, and you coined the phrase critical minerals permit to prosperity. Can you give us a sense of the scale of the opportunity here? And also, what do you mean, what makes this our permit to prosperity?
Sure. Thanks, Stu. Great to be here and great to see everybody in the audience tonight. Permit to prosperity. Well, let's focus on the prosperity side of the equation first. And critical minerals truly are a permit to prosperity, and they represent what I've been saying for some time to be a generational opportunity for British Columbians. The Mining Association of BC conducted an economic impact analysis in Q1 of this year. And we published it in February. And we looked at 17 critical mineral projects, all of them what you would call advanced development projects. They have what they call a National Instrument 43-101, which is a regulatory requirement. So these are real projects. And what we found when we did the analysis is if those 17 projects were developed and constructed, the scope and scale of the benefits are quite eye-popping. So with their construction and development, it's a $36 billion near-term investment in British Columbia. And the construction will be generally 3 to 4 years for each project. That's $23 billion in labor income here in British Columbia. Actually 80% in BC, 20% in the rest of Canada. And some $11 billion in tax revenue for all 3 levels of government. So it's a huge opportunity. The long-term benefit of those 17 projects, if they're constructed, approaches somewhere around $800 billion. Massive GDP impacts, massive flow through communities into the supply chain. So it's really significant. The phrase permit to prosperity, what's important about that is the permit, right? And a permit is something you acquire that allows you to go someplace or to do something. And the big challenge to realizing these benefits and this opportunity right now in British Columbia and indeed across Canada is permitting. And we'll talk about that as we go on, I'm sure. But that's the chief roadblock to achieving these economic benefits. People will likely have heard Minister Wilkinson, who's responsible for Natural Resources Canada, saying, we can't take 15 years to permit a mine in Canada. These are minerals that are essential to get to net zero in 2050, and it takes between 10 to 15 years to permit these mines. We have to do better. We have to make changes to what we do, and if we can do that, we'll be able to develop these projects and realize those benefits.
You said something interesting there, Michael, if we can do that. Jeff, can we do that?
Well, I was born and raised in BC, and so I am incredibly enthusiastic about what we can do in this province. So I have a bit of a bias, but I would say absolutely. And I think it's not just a question of can we, but I think it's a question of like in some ways I actually think the world needs us to. And the reason I say that is, when you look at what is driving critical mineral demand, like most of the big strategic industries that we think about today are incredibly dependent on critical minerals. And so whether it's, advanced computing and all the AI and chatbots, all that, when you're uploading pictures on your phone, and storing them in the cloud, even the cloud is made of metal. And this energy transition, which is, central to what we're trying to achieve in terms of combating climate change, is incredibly metal intensive. And people will throw around all sorts of numbers, but and I'm going to throw around one just to try and put it in perspective. But some people estimate that from a copper demand standpoint, that over the next 10 years to support just the copper growth alone, we need another 6.5 million metric tons of copper. And to put that in perspective, Teck Resources, the company I work for, we operate what is Canada's largest copper mine, Highland Valley Copper, near Kamloops, British Columbia. To meet that type of demand, you'd need at least 50 of those mines to be built over the next 10 years. And as Michael said, it takes a long time to build a new mine. So the challenge in front of us is an enormous one, but so too is the opportunity that represents. And one of the things that I think is really interesting is the same forces that are driving demand for critical minerals, this environmental emergency around trying to address climate change, are also the same forces that in some ways are poised to constrain supply. Because what we're being asked to do as an industry is to produce a lot more metal with far less impact. And as mining companies, I don't think that's something we actually done before. Like it requires massive innovation on the mining side as well, so that we can produce this metal in a way that's lower emission, lower environmental impact, and allow society to meet those environmental needs. So there's a big innovation step here that's also required.
How do we do this, John, and not intensify our own carbon footprint? Because mining in British Columbia requires diesel-powered machinery that you put in diesel-powered trucks, to put on diesel-powered trains, to put on diesel-powered ships to get to the smelter. On one hand, we're wanting to do one thing. How do we address some of the issues that come with increasing supply?
Well, I think the industry is really taking that innovative step in many ways. I mean, in British Columbia, our ace, if you like, is this fantastic hydroelectric resource that we have in this province. And a lot of companies now electrifying their operations. So, for example, Copper Mountain is almost like a trolley bus system with the trucks taking the ore out of the pit. So we are seeing a lot of innovation, and that innovation is going to be absolutely essential. Because you can see with the data coming through that British Columbians understand that there will be a trade-off, but I don't think the trade-off will come at any price. I think there's going to have to be a lot of innovation on waste management, electrification, reducing our footprint, going underground. All of these things will help to reduce our footprint and make mining a bit more palatable to the public.
Heather, from your perspective, you take a look at our ability to be able to realize these resources, and I noted that you recently wrote about supply chain. Okay, sure, it's in the ground, but where does it go from there, and what control do we have post it leaving the ground?
Yeah, great question. So, what we're alluding to, obviously, is the elephant in the room is China. Is not only the world's biggest miner, so just the raw material, but obviously an incredibly significant processor of many minerals and has a near monopoly on many of them. So, rare earth elements is one that we always point to, but lithium, copper, a lot of what we produce ends up going to China and then selling it back to us. So when we talk about the energy transition, and people often talk about, we'll be much more energy secure when we get off fossil fuels. We don't like the volatility of oil and gas and those kinds of things. But we're actively moving to a system that depends on dozens of different minerals, most of them produced in China or produced, in multiple locations. And so we're adding a lot to the complexity and the risk in the supply chain. We've seen the United States make very dramatic tariffs announcements last week on electric vehicles, on solar panels, and those kinds of things, trying to get ahead of this, trying to get ahead of China's, monopolization, dominance of some of these supply chains, offering products cheaper and processing products much cheaper than we could ever do here because we have higher safety, higher environmental standards. So it's getting to a point, kind of break glass, where we really need to start doing something different. And again, it's not just for the energy transition. That's a point I wanted to make. Yes, net zero 2050 is definitely something on all of our minds. But this is about inflation, scarcity, commodities that we will need to have in a year, in 5 years. And so it's a lot bigger than just the energy transition. It's, look around you. You're surrounded by minerals.
So we have a tendency right now to say, China. We look at them with a bit of skepticism or concern. But you pointed out the fact that they are such dominant figures in mining. Without them, are we not going to be, will we be able to attract capital and be able to move forward? Ross, I know that you have some thoughts on this, so I'm going to you because you deal with how do we attract the investment money that's required and then be able to move forward, especially if we've got government policies that are trying to keep China out.
Very good. Well, thank you, Stu. it's a big question, and I want to distinguish a couple of things. First is there's a critical mineral, and then there's a critical metal. What we mine in British Columbia and around the world are minerals, so copper minerals that need to be processed with extra value add things like refineries and smelters to get to the metal. It's the metal that's used in all of these critical things that are used in the energy transition and so forth. And so really, to me, the focus should be on managing the metals rather than the minerals, particularly politically speaking. And then secondly, there's a lot of, quite frankly, crazy demand forecasts for a lot of these metals. We need 35 times more rare earth metals. We need 20 times more lithium. We need more of everything. And then there's a lot of drama around the fact that, it's absolutely correct, China is the dominant supplier of almost all of these metals. They can produce more cheaply, they can produce with less environmental and safety controls for sure, and they have taken it as a national strategy to produce these critical metals. And so they're dominated in almost all of the metals. They dominate in copper, in aluminum, in manganese, and almost every one of those critical metals that are used for all of these industrial applications. So there's a geopolitical problem here. It's not really a supply problem, quite frankly. There's a lot of metals around the world, a lot of minerals that we can mine. We just have to go and mine them. We have to have the regulatory system to allow us to be able to mine them. We can mine them in British Columbia as well as anywhere in the world. It costs us a little bit more than in China, but we can do it. And I think we actually have a fairly supportive government, and we have, generally speaking, a pretty good investment climate right now for mining in British Columbia. So we have a world-class mineral exploration and mining industry here. We've built this up over years. It's one of the strengths of Canada. We go all over the world and look for metals. Today, though, metals are being used as a geopolitical tool. So China, for example, has cut off from time to time supply of things like gallium, germanium, rare earth metals, tungsten from time to time. And this squeezes global producers of these metals for critical things, all the technology you talked about. And that's why Canada and the US and Australia and Europe are getting all worried about production of these metals. And they're starting to regulate. They're putting more kind of constraints to foreign investment in Canadian companies looking all over the world for these metals. It's actually squeezing supply even more than it would otherwise do, I think. So it's quite counterproductive. What they should be doing is they should be incentivizing Canadian production of the metals. So supporting companies like Teck that have a smelter in British Columbia, producing these metals, which can now then compete with Chinese production. That's the place that I think is the important thing to kind of counter this use by China of metals as a geopolitical tool. I'm not particularly vexed with the need to produce more metals in the world. I think there's a lot of supply around the world if we just can get at it. That's kind of the bigger problem than demand, quite frankly. And we'll probably get into this later today, but I think China is absolutely a critical player in this whole thing, and how Canada deals with China is a very important subject, I think.
Well, I want to turn our attention to the role that First Nations can play, because I've got two clips, one from Ellis Ross. Derek, I'll get you to run that one, and then right afterwards, can you run the clip from Nilo Edwards from the First Nations Major Projects Coalition?
Projects that I've went to visit that are on the books right now in northern BC, they're all fully endorsed by First Nations. You talk about the jobs and the potential for economic reconciliation for First Nations. None of that flows until the shovels are put in the ground. So if you don't get a permit, it doesn't matter how many speeches you make about the potential of mining in BC. The major projects in BC are coming to an end. You're talking about Site C, Trans Mountain Pipeline, LNG Canada. Those big revenue generators will be done, and the revenues from those projects will decline. And there's nothing on the books to actually take its place. Mining can pick up the slack.
Our members and other First Nations across the country have an important role to play in attracting that capital in terms of making an informed decision about partnering on those projects with the private sector. because that partnering element has a de-risking factor to it. And it signals to the market as well that where there is Indigenous partnerships, there are also higher ESG ratings and better project planning and more rigorous standards, because that's what our members expect from operators within their territory. With respect to the federal government's role in backstopping some of these opportunities through the new Indigenous Loan Guarantee Program, we have yet to see the details of how that program will be structured, but we have heard from both Minister Freeland and Minister Wilkinson at times talking about the importance of Canada's role in critical minerals and meeting the demand of really the Western world as it looks for safer supply of critical minerals. Logically, the federal government should be thinking about how they backstop First Nation participation in the mining and critical minerals sector. And that is not a straightforward thing to do because the risk profile is a bit different when we talk about mining. But it is absolutely necessary if Canada wants to solidify its market share in the global marketplace.
Michael.
I totally agree with both of those gentlemen in terms of the potential that our industry has in terms of partnership with First Nations and indeed Indigenous peoples across Canada. In BC today, and most people don't realize this, our industry has been advancing economic reconciliation for some time. I mean, there's lots more to do, but I think there's some 64 participation or impact benefit agreements right now on the books. Mineral tax agreements, I believe there's $326 million in mineral tax payments to date with nations, some 65 nations across BC. And nations have become huge partners with mining. We did some analysis in 21 and 2022. Over 150 First Nations businesses sold more than $975 million worth of goods and services into BC's mines and smelters. So it's substantial. You look at a great example of the opportunities. And like every one of these 17 projects is going to go ahead with a high level and degree of First Nations participation and partnerships. Those projects won't proceed unless there is a solid partnership there. But the Blackwater mine, which is an Artemis Gold project in northern BC, is on the land of the Alcacho and Lacuse Dene nations. They have an impact benefit agreement with both of those nations, and I believe over the life of the mine, some $200 million in mineral tax revenue will go to both of those nations. So I know in talking with one of the chiefs, he just said simply, this is transformational for our people.
Sean, I note that we've got a question here, the top question. Kiewit, I'm going to ask you to reply to it.
Thanks, Stu. Mineral exploration and mining start with geoscience, the geological knowledge needed to understand mineral resources. Does BC have the base knowledge to attract initial investment and interest? What more could we be doing?
That's a fantastic question. And sorry, can you hear me? That's a great question. And I'm the president and CEO of the Association for Mineral Exploration. We have over 5,000 members in mineral exploration who are based in BC or who operate in BC. And what I can tell you is there's a fantastic potential and an incredible body of geoscience that we have here in British Columbia, not only from Geoscience BC, but from all of our partners here. And where we have, I think, an even greater opportunity moving forward is the nature by which mineral exploration is done with really solid, substantive partnerships with Indigenous peoples and nations. All right, there's a wealth of not only geoscience that has been collected, but traditional indigenous knowledge that can be done jointly with mineral exploration, earlier and more often in the exploration cycle. I was just on a call today with a nation looking to develop their own indigenous owned exploration entity and hoping to partner with AME members, right? And this is the type of incredible innovation that we can do to say, enhance relationships, to, improve our ability to enhance our industry and reconciliation, but also look at how can we jointly explore to gather even more data that would attract investment, but also to craft those solid relationships that will, resonate not only in BC and Canada, but throughout the world.
John, I know that you want to jump in on this.
And in addition to the the strengths that Kirit's outlining there, I'd like to say that UBC has one of the top centres in the world for exploration research, the MDRU, which was founded by Peter Bradshaw about 30 years ago. But that research is world class, and looking at big big ore bodies in BC. So we are, I think, the backbone, the ecosystem, if you like, for geoscience in BC is very strong.
Ross, I see you wanting to add to this.
Well, I don't want to add at all. I want to certainly agree with that. BC and Canada generally is a world leader in mineral exploration. It starts right here. We've had decades of experience in exploring British Columbia, mining in British Columbia, and we're taking that to the world, and we're really good at it. We have the ecosystem here of geologists, engineers, lawyers, professional associations, accountants even, who are really specialized in mining. So it's a very, very, very competent human resource group, and it's important that Canada maintains that. And part of it is supporting a very strong mining industry domestically.
Jeff, Teck, Teck is really well established in the mining community here in British Columbia, but how important is it for you as you move forward and seek out the development of new projects that you have this close relationship with First Nations? And I ask it from the perspective of how much did they, as Nilo talked about, how do they help to de-risk a project and also to bring investment dollars?
Well, I think regardless of where you operate in the world today, the vast majority, I can't think of a mineral project at Teck that isn't either on or adjacent to Indigenous lands. And certainly in British Columbia, you wouldn't find a mine that's not on an Indigenous nation's territory. So, from our perspective, it's just foundational. Like you actually don't have a project at all unless you have a relationship with that host nation where they want you to be operating on their territory. So at Teck, and I think at many mining companies, the very first thing we do when we're looking at any type of mineral opportunity is to go and meet with the people who live there, which in British Columbia and in many jurisdictions around the world, the mines aren't, they're not in downtown Vancouver. They're in outside the Lower Mainland. So often it is meeting with Indigenous people who live in that region, and it's that early engagement that sets these projects up for success, or in some cases tells you very clearly that, this is not an appropriate place for a mine, and that's okay too. There's all sorts of places where we don't need to mine, or for very good reasons that we shouldn't. But it's that early engagement that I think allows you to develop the certainty that allows you to advance a project and ultimately deliver to the market what it wants. And I think that to Ross's point is a part where BC, I think, does have a real advantage. We have a pre-existing ecosystem here of the talent, of examples of the partnerships that can exist with Indigenous nations when it comes to developing mines. And when you look at the other end of the supply chain, like these large auto manufacturers, they're hungry for critical minerals that are responsibly developed and sourced that they can rely on. And jurisdictions like British Columbia are just so well set up to supply that. It's a huge opportunity for us.
Michael.
There's, I believe, some 1,100 exploration and mining companies in like the 7 or 8 blocks around this corner, Dunsmuir and Hammond. Right. We are a global mining center of excellence here in BC that has built up over the years. The supply chain in British Columbia that supports today's mining sector is huge. I mean, there's more than 4,000 small, medium, and Indigenous affiliated businesses in that supply chain here in BC. 3.7 billion is spent annually. And the thing that we need to be cognizant of, though, is, and I go back to those 17 projects and the opportunity, the investment and the talent that's here is also working around the world. And if we can't develop mines here in a timely way, that talent will go elsewhere, right?
All right. Heather, I'll come to you in a moment, Kirit. Heather.
So yeah, great. Yeah, I want to touch on the first aspect, and we're painting a very rosy picture, and it is. There's tremendous opportunity. I don't know if people know this, but it's in the Tall Tan annual report last year, but almost 3% of global exploration spending was spent in Tall Tan territory last year. And of course, it encompasses most of the Golden Triangle. They have tremendous reserves, but they're also a very sophisticated nation, and then they've really been able to leverage and lead in that mining jurisdiction. There's a few other nations and a few other regions where Indigenous nations really have that sophistication, have the governance structure that they can really benefit and lead that mining. But there are some areas where it is still a struggle, and so we shouldn't overlook that. It does often add time. It does often add some struggle to some projects. And so we do need, we are in the process of improving the consultation and the benefits and the suite of benefits that Indigenous nations can expect when a mining project goes well. And when it does go well, I can give an example. I think one of the few projects that's been announced, approved federally recently is Marathon Palladium in Ontario. And that was really driven partly by the partnership with the local First Nation that wanted that project, that pushed the federal government to approve it instead of slowing it or delaying it or having concerns. And then on the other hand, you can have something like the Ring of Fire, where a big problem with the Ring of Fire has a lot of problems. We know the potential. We talk about the Ring of Fire all the time, but the lack of consensus amongst the neighboring Indigenous nations is a big barrier to that project, and they're still working through it. So there's a lot there. But the last thing, I want to say, Nilo mentioned the loan guarantee. And is the investment, can this attract investment? Can certainly de-risk it. A loan guarantee maybe isn't great for buying shares or buying equity in a mine because it is volatile. Oil and gas upstream face the same problem. But the impact and benefit agreements, the procurement, royalties, perhaps more royalty trusts, royalty credits. There's a lot of different ways you can get more money in the upstream. And I want to give a shout out to Teck. Because in Alaska, they have the Red Dog zinc mine. And as far as I know, that has been the most profitable mine for the local Indigenous groups of any mine in the world. Zinc had a great year in 2022. It's sitting on native Alaskan land. I think that got over $400 million Canadian in royalties in 2022 because of the agreement they have with Teck. So it can be a very good business for Indigenous nations when it goes right.
Kirit.
Just a fantastic, comments from everyone here. And I think it really resonates that, when we all work together on a common goal, we can achieve that greatness that is here in British Columbia. And one of the things that, from our members we talk to about is, you can't have that incredible, revenue generating mine or, a 50% equity stake with a nation in a mine if you don't explore for it, right? And one of the key things is the World Bank said that there's going to be a 500% increase in demand for critical minerals by 2050, 500%. So one of the key things that we have to look at is, yes, how do we maximize what we currently have, but how do we ensure that we're also looking for those greenfield developments that's going to meet that demand? How do we do it responsibly? How do we do it with Indigenous true partnership and respect? And I'm so excited to see that starting to grow and grow even more. Last year, mineral exploration provided over $700 million to the BC economy, 21% to Indigenous groups, right? And I think there's so much opportunity now for all of us to innovate, saying, how can we do it better? How can we create stronger relationships at the inception of an idea to the manifestation of a mine? And I'm glad to see with so many incredible stakeholders here, us doing that.
You bring up an interesting point. Derek, we have a clip from Philippa Wilshaw that we called Purpose, moving forward with purpose. Can you please play that? Because you touched on this, Kirit.
I think, first of all, we've got to come together with purpose. We can spend a lot of time talking about these things, and I'm not talking about being less rigorous through permitting. I'm not talking about being less rigorous around our standards around environmental. Those are critically important. But I think what we can do is all come to the table with purpose, and to truly put the money behind the strategy. The strategy is one thing. We've got to deliver against this strategy, and it really is a race, because if we don't move fast, somebody else will. And I think we really need to be asking ourselves, do we want these critical minerals to come from Canada, or do we want them to come from somewhere else? So we have to stop being the nice guy and just move a little faster, I think.
Interesting question. Michael.
Yeah, I agree. We are in a race. And perhaps today might not be the best day to use an NHL metaphor. But we're not the only game in town. And, we have an abundance, a blessing of critical minerals here and across Canada. And countries are looking to us for our critical minerals. But there are other jurisdictions. And capital is mobile, and people are mobile. And if we can't kind of come together with purpose and come to some consensus on what it is we want to do with this resource, then that investment and that talent is going to go to other jurisdictions. Right? I was doing a little bit of Googling today, and I Googled how long did it take to put a man on the moon? 8 years. So it was 8 years. Remember what I said earlier about Minister Wilkins saying it can't take 15 years to permit a mine. Surely to God, we can bring that number down to 8, right? A lot of smart people here, right? A lot of smart people in government. We're a highly, one of the most regulated industries. We have to have some purpose and say, do we want to develop these minerals in a good amount of time so we can get the investment, so we can advance economic reconciliation and support people and prosperity in BC communities?
It's a big question. There's no doubt about it. How do we do that? I have a clip that I want to play from Gregory Freeman from Invest Vancouver, because, how do we attract capital and what are we attracting them to? Can you please play Gregory's clip for us, Derek?
Yeah, we need to mine more, but we need to do less environmental damage while we're doing it. So we need to get more efficient and we need to be more careful. Right. And at the same time, it's like, yes, but rip up everything, right? We need tons more. Yeah. And so then the question becomes, well, how are we going to do that? And what the story I have for you is that we are uniquely positioned in BC to help solve that problem, because we have both the mining industry expertise, particularly when it comes to exploration and to processing. Yep. And we have a burgeoning tech sector that is particularly solid in applied AI. And so it's the combination of those two things. Because people often see we've got a resource economy, we have a technology economy, and what they're missing is that it's going to be the intersection of those two that's going to solve this for us. Mines are complex systems that generate a ton of data. And AI is the whole, its best use case is gleaning information and making sense out of vast fields of, vast amounts of data that humans, we can't see the pattern, but the AI does, and that allows us to be more efficient and do them and pull the minerals out, process them in ways that are more efficient, that will both get us more of the minerals and do it with less environmental damage. And it's one of those cases where less environmental damage, more efficient, your financial incentive and your environmental incentive are both pointing in the same direction. And we have the opportunity to step in and take advantage of that.
John.
Yeah, this is so this is a great hidden story that gets lost sometimes. And if you start looking at where the technology innovation is coming from, there's some really exciting stories coming out there. I mean, you just heard about artificial intelligence. I spent most of today with an incubator of mining technology called the Creative Destruction Lab, And AI is everywhere. All of these spin-out companies from universities, from UBC, from inventors all over Canada. They're using these AI for mineral processing, for exploration. But it's not just AI. It's so many different things. Using biotechnology. You think about biotechnology in medicine. Well, I'll tell you what, biotechnology has a huge role to play in the clean mining of the future. We can use microbes to process minerals. We can use microbes to remediate mine sites that have been, sort of lost in the past. So I think there's a huge story with, these new high-tech jobs actually feeding into the competitive advantage of our mining industry here in Canada. It's a story that really needs to be told a lot more clearly, but I think it's very exciting.
I think it's very interesting that you refer to microbes because, of course, Genome BC is investing a considerable amount of money and time into research around the development of understanding what the genomics of all of the different elements are, how they work together, how we can work with the environment and realize this opportunity. I'll go to you first, Jeff. Michael, then Kirit, okay?
Well, maybe just picking up on Genome BC and microbes. So I used to work in tech steelmaking coal business, which is in the near Fernie Sparwood in the Kootenays of British Columbia, and those mines have operated for over 100 years in that region. And what's happened there over the last 10, 15 years on water quality is really amazing. So because of that history of mining, there was a legacy impact where there was water quality issues in that region associated with primarily a constituent called selenium. And starting about a decade and a half ago, Teck started investing in treating that water. And the very first generation of treatment facility looked exactly like what you'd expect it to look like, a giant building with pipes and pumps and, looked like a water treatment facility. So that was Gen 1. Gen 2 was a little more innovative. We started using some of the old mined out pits, and we discovered that natural occurring biology could actually remove selenium and other mine affected constituents from the water. And working with organizations like Genome BC, we realized if you just feed these bugs, they start to clean the water for you. So generation 2 was we'd pump the water up into these mined out pits, and then we'd use the bugs to clean the water. Clean water comes out the other side. Gen 3, which we're now building now, is we've completely redesigned the mines so that we actually build these landforms with the bugs in them, so that now that water pollution doesn't actually leave the mine site in the first place. You don't actually have to treat the water. The treatment's built into the mine design, and it's natural biology that's doing it. And to me, that's just a great example of how, when we think about the minerals that the world needs, it's a way you can mine more with far less impact in using natural processes to actually address some of the historic impacts associated with mining.
Michael?
It's incumbent upon me just to call something out. I didn't like the dichotomy that we began with Mario when he was saying there was a choice between economic growth and the environment. I think that's a false dichotomy. Clearly, in mining, we do dig big holes to extract natural resources. But I think the footprint of our sector in British Columbia is less than some 0.002% of the land base. So you have to keep that in perspective. The other thing too is our sector has changed significantly. Like we're largely a tech TECH sector, right? And Teck is one of the largest procurers of technology in British Columbia. In fact, BC's growing clean tech sector in many ways has been built by working with BC's resource sector. There's a lot of fantastic companies out there, but there is so much emphasis and time and effort and money that goes into innovation, AI, automation, trying to increase productivity, reduce footprint. And there's some great examples in BC too. One has to remember, we in our sector must reclaim the mine, right? You look at Teck Sullivan Mine as a fantastic story. You have to look pretty hard to see that it was actually a mine at one point in time. So there's a lot on us from society, in which we don't disagree with, for us to make sure that once we're done, that we put things back together again and we turn it back into a place where grass can grow and the original fauna can come back.
Kirit, I know that you want to speak to this point, but Ross, I'm sure that you do too, because your commitment to protecting the environment is remarkable. So, Kirit, to you first.
I think about that comment about purpose and what that key driver of purpose is. I truly believe here in Canada and British Columbia, we have this incredible purpose and goal and drive of, are we all collectively going to work together to prove to BC, to Canada, to the world, that we can all do this together? That industry, Indigenous groups, environment, we can all come together and innovate and create that economy that we want to do. To use an example from Michael, from the moon landing, is we do these things because they're hard, not because they're easy. Right? And that's the opportunity that we have here. I saw a fantastic presentation from Stuart McNish on, the incredible technology that's being applied to, having less of a footprint on mines. And I think those are those key things that we need to be showing, those incredible examples of innovation at work. I was talking to a group of younger students who were asking me about my career, why I came into natural resources from a legal background. And they said, I'm not too sure which side I should be working on. I said, what do you mean by side? The side that we should be on is all of us working together for the benefit of all and coming together for it, versus those who on any side want to continue the status quo. And we can do that. The next question that came was, well, is that what is happening at the higher levels? And I think that's where we have another great opportunity, is for industry, government, Indigenous peoples, myriad of stakeholders to come together and build those processes that work for all, that purpose, that drive, that vision, that we can all do it. Nelson Mandela said, it's impossible until it happens. And I truly believe that we can do that here in BC and develop a natural resource economy and a mining economy that's the envy of the world.
Ross?
Sure, thank you. So it's true, I've been in the mining business almost my whole career, which is over 50 years now, all over the world. But I've also been a very committed environmentalist at the same time. And they may sound incompatible by people who don't realize the changes that have happened in the mining industry globally over the same period. Mining is not done today like it used to be done. It's a much cleaner, safer, and quite frankly, more productive industry than it has ever been. And it has a beginning and it has an end. These are non-renewable resources. Mines always end at some point when they are mined out. At that point, they have to be reclaimed. And there are places that I can, as you said about Sullivan, most people wouldn't even know there was a mine there. That's how well they can be reclaimed these days. But it's true, there is a footprint, there is an impact to mining, and we have to simply balance that with the benefits that come from mining, which are everywhere, in every single thing we do in every single day of our lives, all over the world. Mining, if you can't grow it, you have to mine it. It's a part of our global society. But we have to be vigilant, and we can't, citizens have to be very careful that we mine as well as we can, that there is scrutiny, there's watchdogs. There's a lot of environmental organizations that are watching what we're doing, and they should. And on that point, coming back to the Indigenous issues, there are a lot of places in BC where actually the Indigenous nations don't want mines for cultural reasons, for economic reasons, traditional reasons, and there's a movement right now to create protected areas in certain parts of the province where Indigenous nations say, we don't want mining. In fact, we don't want logging, we don't want ranching, we don't want anything. We want to protect those areas for nature, for various reasons. And so I think one of the issues today in British Columbia is a certain amount of conflict, because exploration companies and to some degree mining companies don't actually know where nations say mining is fine and where nations say we just don't want mining. And one of the things I'm doing is trying to support nations who are declaring Indigenous protected areas over part of their traditional territories, where they're saying we don't want mining here, and the rest of our traditional territory, mining's fine, within the the environmental regulations that we have in our province. I think that's going to bring clarity. It's going to bring much more certainty to the process of mineral exploration and mining, and that's why I'm a real champion of that. Plus, of course, it's great for things like biodiversity loss, it stems that. It's good for climate change resilience. It's good for all kinds of other things. So I think you can kind of be a miner on one hand, and you can also be an environmentalist today. They're not incompatible.
John.
Triggered a thought, Ross, that a great case study of how that sort of arrangement can be made with protecting Indigenous land but still allowing mining to go ahead is the really innovative relationship between the Tahltan and Skeena. We have someone from Skeena in this audience, but Mount Edzerza is a sacred mountain on Tahltan territory. And a deal was done between to trade off different land to protect Mount Edzerza. So, it is what you're saying is possible. It's doable. I mean, the Tahltan are exceptional in their sophistication, but I think it shows a way forward that Ross, obviously, you're passionate about as well.
Kieran.
I really appreciate that comment as well in terms of like, how can we build something more predictable and more sustainable moving forward? My background before I came into this role is I practiced Aboriginal law and regulatory law for almost 10 years. And I think one of the key things that we need to ensure in whatever we're building here in British Columbia is that there is regulatory certainty, not only in what is developed, but in how we develop them. Right. So what is the process that goes into some of those items? How do we create that regulatory certainty? And, I think one of the key things I do when I start talking to people about mineral exploration and mining, and I say, what do you think staking a claim means? And they say, well, that means you can do whatever you want on the land. That means you can mine. That means you can do whatever. I said, no, all it allows you to do is to do non-invasive exploration on an area for data collection. And I think one of the things, and this is the incredible opportunity and nuances that we have in developing policy is, you can't drill without a Mines Act notice of work permit. You can't put a mine without any notice of work permits pursuant to the Mines Act. So long as we're ensuring that whatever we're building and developing is understanding of the different nuances involved, that not all actors in mineral exploration and mining are of the same capacities, and that we ensure that there is that regulatory certainty that's involved, I'm sure that we can create a system that works for everyone.
So I want to change topics just a little bit here because Gregory Freeman talked about AI, the technology that's going on here. Michael, you talked about how many and how important the mining sector is here, the wealth of innovation and knowledge that we have. I have a clip from Greg Agnew from Ideon right at the moment. They are developing the kind of technology that other mining organizations around the world are already starting to buy, and helps to reduce environmental footprint, but then speed up process to confirmation of a known resource. Derek, can you play Gary's clip, please?
There are definite benefits for Ideon being based and founded here in BC. First of all, from a talent acquisition perspective, Vancouver has a long history of mining technology businesses. And so there's actually some deep capabilities here. And obviously, Vancouver's a pretty nice place to live. And so the ability to attract people, experts from all over the world to come and live here, we feel we're in a very fortunate position. There's not too many companies building hardware here in BC. And not only do we develop, leading edge software and services, but we build our own, design and build our own hardware here in BC. So it's bringing in pretty skilled manufacturing jobs, as well as obviously the software development and engineering jobs that you would expect in a business like ours. Added to that, Vancouver is one of the world's, key mining capitals. And in fact, Canada it represents 60% of the public mining companies in the world. And so Canada is a mining nation. As I always think about it, is a 1 + 1 = 3. If you have a great mining industry that drives great GDP for Canada, and then you apply Canadian technologies to help improve the efficiency and the effectiveness of that sector, I think that's a great win for Canada because it's an accelerant to a pretty large contributor to GDP.
Ideon has a remarkable technology that they are putting to use, and Kiewit, I'm sure you're fully aware of it, and how it helps to reduce environmental impact in just confirming known resources. John, I noticed that you want to speak to that.
Yeah, Ideon's just a great example of a company that's a BC-made success story. And but if you look at Ideon's history, they've actually come out of a pretty unique research and development facility in near UBC called Triumph, which is subatomic particles. And I think that's a part of the pattern that we're seeing is companies like Tech partnering with these research facilities, companies like Ideon spinning them out. There really is an ecosystem here which supports companies like Ideon, but also will create the Ideons of the future as well. I think it's incredibly exciting technology.
So let's also talk about our ability to attract the workforce that's needed to be able to realize the opportunity here. Heather, I notice you nodding. Let's start with you.
Well, let's start, because I wanted to jump on the technology piece too. And my husband actually works in mining. He works in a diamond mine in Northwest Territories. So I do think about the aging population. I think about our society has really discouraged youth, I think, from going into extractive industries. As having to choose a side. Are you going to the evil side of extraction, or are you going to, save the world and be a good person? And so we do have an aging workforce, and we have lost that ability to attract. And we see this in mining schools and trades programs everywhere, decline in enrollment and that kind of thing. And then when we look at where a lot of the opportunity for more critical minerals and more mining in Canada tends to be in northern, rural, and remote areas. And, my husband, goes 2 in, 2 out, flies in, flies out. A lot of these mines would need to have that. And that also is a deterrent, I think, to the younger generation, that they don't want to do it. And so I think about how are we going to have the mining workforce just to maintain the mining levels that we have, let alone increase by 500% or whatever number you want to choose for net zero. And part of that, I think, is going to have to be automation and robotics, to get to my point. And to be able to maybe have more and using artificial intelligence again to do some of the mining. So there are things that we're going to, I think, have to leverage the technology to do things where it's just going to get harder and more expensive to physically fly a person out, put them in the mine, and do those things. That requires also, in a lot of these rural and remote areas, better internet connectivity, fiber connectivity to all these mines, so that they can be 21st century mines, so they can take advantage of all that technology. So certainly for Canada, where our untapped resources are, where mines tend to be, we need to be leveraging, all the technology, I think, to substitute for some of that physical labor.
So Jeff, how do we attract the workforce that we need?
Well, I think technology certainly plays a part in it, but I think our experience has been like the nature of jobs in the mining industry are changing, and I think when most people picture a miner, they immediately jump back to like sort of I was going to say the 1800s, but I'm not even sure what century it actually is. But you picture these people with coal on their faces, and they go to work with a pickaxe, and that's not really what anyone's doing, or very few people in the modern mining industry are doing nowadays anyways. Like it's data scientists, it's hygienists, it is an incredibly diverse workforce. And I think that for us is both one of the big challenges and opportunities that the sector faces. Like today, for example, women are still significantly underrepresented in the mining sector. You can see that to a degree reflected in our in-person panel here today, that we have work to do in terms of increasing representation in our sector, but it also represents a significant opportunity, because if we can attract more women to the sector, that's 50% of the population, and only roughly 20% of our workforce as an industry. So it's a significant opportunity to bring new talent into the industry. And when you think about the innovation questions that we were talking about earlier, like the need for the industry to innovate, like most innovation is not people inventing stuff. It's often people taking an idea from one sector and applying it in a new context. And to me, the way you accelerate doing that is really through diversity. It's bringing people from different experience, different background together in teams, so that you can come up with these really innovative ideas. And so I think that represents a big opportunity to fill some of the labor shortage that we have, but it is going to be a big challenge going forward.
Kirit, and then John, you're out at the university. I want your thoughts too.
I think that was an excellent point that was made here in terms of, how do we incentivize and get more people interested, and also to, live in some of those locations where, this mining is occurring. And I think it's, if you build it, they will come, right? If you have the electrification, if you have the highways, if you have that local infrastructure, people will want to go and work there. I think it's so important in terms of ensuring how do we attract more younger people, like attract more diverse people, women, is, do we have the right supports up at sites, both, emotionally, psychologically, family supports? Like, how do we make it easier for people to not only work here in Vancouver, but also out at different mine sites as well? I can tell you from my own experience and, in the Punjabi community, there are so many people who are excited to work in mineral exploration and mining, are just looking to the how. I was up at a mine site where it was the first two Punjabi youth were there as security, and we saw each other and thought, we're belonging in this now. So I think that key question of how do we get more people into the industry is thinking about that concept of what is that mining family. Someone told me that, part of that mineral exploration mining family is when you're up on site and you're putting boot leather to rock. And I thought, we got to start thinking about it as the mining family is all of us. It's that engineer, it's that truck driver, it's that person doing technology development. Like, it is all of us. And I think that's how we're going to start attracting more people to ensure that, this is all of our industry and all of our collective future.
John.
Yeah, I mean, UBC is in some ways, mining has never been stronger at UBC than it is now. We've got world-class centres of excellence in exploration. We have BRIM, the Bradshaw Research Institute for Mining Minerals. We have world-class experts in mineral processing. But on the graduate side, it's a struggle. It's really hard. We across Canada, we see mining engineering schools closing. Dalhousie closed last year. Across North America, we see them closing. Across the world, actually, in Australia, they're closing too. So we're seeing this pickup in demand for highly skilled workers. I mean, the straight labour jobs of the past are probably going, but you still need the problem solvers. You still need the leaders. You still need the innovators. And we've got about 25 students coming into our program this year in mining engineering, 25, and we're one of a handful of mining schools in Canada. So, if you think about what's risking the energy transition and what's risking our industry, I keep coming back to this: we just don't have the people, and it's the people who are going to lead and innovate and change the industry. So, for me, this is a critical matter. It's something that we really have to come to terms with and deal with as an industry. Otherwise, there was an oil and gas boom in Australia in 2010, and chefs at work camps were getting paid $250,000. Yeah, true. We can see this. We can see this happening with the coming minerals boom. If industry doesn't want that to happen, to see this huge wage inflation and a fight to get talent, then we've got to deal with this now, because it's the issue has been building up for some time.
Michael, yeah.
Part of the problem is you got a bunch of old white guys trying to figure out how to attract a more diverse, youthful generation. Right here, Michael. So TikTok. It's a real vulnerability, and I think you could say the energy transition, insofar as Canada goes, and maybe Australia and the U.S. hangs in the balance, because our workforce is diminished, and we're zero unemployment rate and many jobs unfilled. So what we have is youth. There's a perception issue with the reality of the industry, and we're not doing a good enough job. We have to do a better job communicating and meeting young people where they're at, and conveying the benefits and engaging them. And it's something, there's a lot of effort and a lot of work going into it, but we have to do more.
Well, Ross, you're making real investments in education, and in the future you support UBC quite significantly.
Well, I do, but we also employ a lot of people in the companies I'm involved with. The two companies I founded, the silver company, we have 24,000 employees now. The gold company, we have about 8,000 employees. We just finished building a $1.7 billion new gold mine in Ontario We had 2,000 people there during the construction period. We have about 700 right now in the operation phase. We haven't had a problem finding good people, but they're all over the world. You know, our head office in Vancouver in the silver company has about 100 people now, 18 languages. This is not the demographic we see here, almost here. It's you know, we have 15 to 20% female now, pretty much everywhere, in Brazil, in Mexico, everywhere. This is a new world, and so I think some of the problems we've seen in the past, and maybe the problems at some of our schools in Canada with Canadians, traditional Canadians going into these fields, yes, we might have a problem here, but we have a lot of international immigrants to Canada. If you want to see, the biggest mines in Canada, of course, aren't in BC, they're in Fort McMurray. And if you want to see an international house, go to Fort McMurray, and you'll see every nationality under the sun up there, working hard, doing really good jobs, being well-trained. They're young, they're smart, and they're global citizens, but they're now Canadians. And so that's where we have drawn from. And I don't really see a big problem, quite frankly, going forward.
What a breath of fresh air. Thank you. So, Sean, I'd like to go to the top question here, and then I'm going to come to you, Jeff, because I think that it's a good place to start in responding to this. Sean?
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. What are the plans for increasing refining capacity in Canada? This appears to be the big elephant in the room when talking about critical mineral development.
So, Teck, you do have capacity on the refinement side, but where do we go from here? It doesn't look like there's much in the works to be able to increase that. And Heather, I want to come to you. If we don't do that, what does it do for our national security to be able to actually protect these critical minerals that we're here to talk about?
Maybe I'll start by talking about what we're doing at Teck,
Yeah.
and then others can pick up from there. But so we operate a smelting refining facility called Trail Operations, which is in Trail, British Columbia. Many of you will have seen it if you've been through Trail. It's hard to miss. It's right in the center of town, and it's a facility that's been there for over 100 years. And part of what I think is interesting about that facility, there's lots of things that are interesting about that facility. It produces I think it produces almost every product on the periodic table. Like there's an amazing amount of science going on in that facility, and everything that comes into it. So concentrates come from actually our Red Dog mine in Alaska. They come down under the Lions Gate Bridge to Vancouver Wharfs, just on the North Shore here, the building with the blue roof next to the yellow sulfur pile. And then from there, it goes up to Trail and is refined into a finished product, into a metal product that's sold primarily in North America. And there's other concentrates that come from around the world into that facility. And so some of it gets sold as metal, but it also produces fertilizer and dozens of other products that go out of that facility. So everything that comes in goes out as a product. And it's continually reinvented itself for over 100 years and adjusted its process to different commodity, or different concentrate streams, or different types of minerals that are coming into the facility to produce different products for a changing market. It even played a role in the Second World War around the development of nuclear energy and the atomic bomb. So lots of interesting stuff has happened there, including the invention of the walkie-talkie. I'll stop there about Trail and talk a bit about what we're doing next, but it's a really fascinating place. In terms of what we're looking at for the future, we really are, I think, at an inflection point where the next sort of phase of what that facility looks like is we're sort of on the precipice of entering. So we've been developing a project there. It's an electric vehicle battery recycling facility. It would be the largest in Western North America. And part of what makes it uniquely suited to do that is, first, it's one of the only smelting refining facilities that we have left on the western side of North America. But secondly, when you think about where EV batteries are that are available to recycle, they're actually right here on the west coast of North America, because it's where all the old electric vehicles are. It was actually California, Washington State, British Columbia were some of the first jurisdictions where you saw a high level of uptake of electric vehicles a decade ago. And now that those batteries are coming to end of life, the only place to send them for processing really is back overseas to China to extract those minerals. And by building a processing facility right here in British Columbia, we'd be able to extract those minerals here, keep them in North America, and then move them back through our supply chain. So I think it's quite an exciting project. And it's still sort of early phases. We're working through the process with government and others, but it does represent an exciting opportunity to expand processing capacity here in British Columbia.
Yeah, that is an exciting project, and it speaks to what Ross was saying earlier. But Heather, I'm going to come to you first and then John, because yes, we've got this wonderful example of tech in trail, but if we want to make sure that we do have security in supply line, and we've identified it here in Canada, and especially in the United States, they recognize, even though they're not moving any faster than we are, that this is a national security issue. How important is it that we support the development of processing?
Well, I mean, it's essential. And again, it's the energy transition, but it's far beyond that. It's our digital lives and it's our defense sector also. You need all these things. We're running through our munitions in Ukraine and elsewhere, and we need to backfill it. And that takes a lot of minerals. I want to highlight, some of the differences, what happens when we move to an energy transition. Right now with oil, we have refining capacity in every continent. And most countries have some refining capacity, certainly the advanced countries. And then when you get to critical minerals, though, it becomes much more concentrated. And again, China is dominant, but Asia is quite dominant. And they just do it for cheaper. And so what happens, when they can control, and was mentioned, with the gallium and that kind of thing, when they can control and put on export controls of some of these things that are essential for our manufacturing supply chain, it becomes a big problem. And I want to give a very clear example. And I wrote an op-ed about this last week, so you can kind of see all the details. But on rare earths, that is rare earth elements, rare earth metals is a critical mineral, a group of critical minerals that China has quite good control over the entire supply chain, from the mining to the processing, have frequently imposed export restrictions as geopolitical leverage. And that spurred a lot of countries to want to mine their own rare earths and process their own rare earths. And in Canada, it was a mine in Northwest Territories, Nechalacho, that started doing some rare earth mining, and it was meant to be processed in Saskatoon. And this all happened, in the last couple of months. That first the Chinese undermined the price of rare earths. It made Vital Metals, they were going to bankruptcy, put their subsidiary into bankruptcy in Saskatoon. The Chinese company, Shanghai Resources, came in, bought them out, bought their stockpile, gave a big cash infusion, and then sold off the Saskatoon processing plant that was over 50% done construction. And now that has just disappeared. And since then, the Chinese have also put on export controls on rare earth processing technologies, which they lead the world in. And so very actively trying to maintain their stranglehold on the rare earth supply chain, on the processing, not wanting to give up that control to any, kind of Western come-uppers. And so, these are capital G geopolitics being played out on the processing side. If you look at the major projects inventory, I'm glad to hear about this trail, the century-old, processing that keeps getting a new life. But the money is not going into processing. You can see what is planned, what's under construction in Canada, in Natural Resources Canada's major project inventory. The money is not pouring into processing. And that is the bottleneck that we need to be concerned about. And to the point that was made earlier, it's not so much, the mining is very important, but that's not the end of the story. You can mine it all, you can have it in a stockpile, but someone has to process it. It's become something useful that we can apply into our manufacturing supply chain at the end of the day. And that's still not happening.
John, I know you wanted to make a comment, and Michael right after.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to trail a little bit. Trail is a national asset. In terms of geopolitics, I think it's the largest producer of germanium outside of China. And in terms of its ability to reinvent itself has just been remarkable. So at the moment, BRIM researchers are working with trail to figure out ways to decarbonise trail. Using more electrification, more electricity, carbon capture and storage, and this actually brings up a really interesting question. So the bottleneck, the really strategic issue is at the processing stage, the smelting. But this is where most of the carbon dioxide gets produced. The mining itself produces very little carbon dioxide compared to the downstream processing. So we have to start to reconcile, how do we regulate the carbon emissions of the industry on the processing side, but still not lose out on the geopolitical side of this. So there's a really interesting tension that starts to emerge. I think there's really room for innovation in carbon policy, particularly when it comes to smelting and thinking about how smelting actually contributes to lowering carbon emissions through metals as they go into products all around the world.
Michael.
Jeff mentioned Vancouver Wharves, just down below Lionsgate Bridge, and that is the one place where a lot of British Columbia's copper concentrate ends up before it heads off on a ship to Korea or Japan or Taiwan and China. We're Canada's largest exporter of copper. We produce I think, just under 80% of Canada's copper here in British Columbia. It is the electrification metal. We're vulnerable. This is about geopolitics. We have a mutual dependence. We're vulnerable to China and Russia. Our minister, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs was at the Brookings Institute 2 years ago and talked about onshoring, and that we were going to make these decisions to onshore critical mineral processing. Haven't seen that. It will take a focused decision. The US has done it with chips. Some 60 or 70 billion invested in, I believe, Arizona or New Mexico, 2 chip plants. That's what we would be talking about. The existing supply chain for copper in those kind of, I think, relatively new refineries in those countries is very cost effective. So it's difficult to kind of break the habit. If you're going to do it here in North America, it's going to take government and some big decisions.
So we're just about out of time, but there's one last question here that I'd like Sean to pose and ask each of you because I think it speaks so much to the future and going back to the workforce. Sean, can you read that top line question?
Thanks, Stu. If youth want to make a meaningful difference in the world through environmental and social impact in their work, what narrative of change and leadership does the mining industry need so youth are inspired to join and make a change?
Who would like to start? John.
I'll start very quickly with an anecdote. I had a young student coming to talk to me about mining and essentially saying, look, why should I join the mining industry? And this is one of our best students in engineering. And he said, will it be possible for me to start up a clean tech company and innovate and use high technology in mining? And well, I said, absolutely. We have so many companies with those that exactly the same that example. So I think we need to tell the reality of modern mining better. Explain the story a lot better, because I think when you really sit people down and see what modern mining is today, it's a much more compelling proposition to enter the workforce in the industry.
Ross, what's your message to young people who might be going, yeah, right?
Yeah, I just take following that comment. Mining has a terrible reputation. It's earned it over 100 years in the past of being a dirty, polluting industry. But it's not like that today. Especially the public company management of mines, because you're always under the scrutiny of not only regulators, but shareholders and NGOs. It's just done differently today. It's cleaner, and it's constantly using new technology, high technology throughout the industry. There's jobs for all kinds of people who are interested in different sectors of employment, from extremely high tech down to driving a truck. And the big movement right now is to try to decarbonize the whole mine, go to net zero. And every single responsible mining company in the world is trying to do that right now. It's not as easy as it sounds. It's actually very difficult because, as you said, you're using these big trucks and they do use diesel, and electrification is more difficult, or especially underground. There's issues with that as well for underground mines. But there's a huge amount of effort. It's a focus of every single board meeting, of every public company in the business. People who are in the industry are, I think, by and large, very responsible, very understanding of these issues. It's a different world than it was 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 20 years ago. But you're right, we don't tell the story very well. We're not great at being public speakers on how great mining is. It's just something that isn't it's just not, it's not something we do. And so we live with this reputation, but it is changing. Mines are cleaner and better, and I think it's a great business for almost any young student who wishes to go into it.
Well, I'll argue with you, Ross. I think you're doing a good job of telling that story right now. You're a great public speaker. Great.
Thank you. As the young person, I hopefully can say I'm the young person on the stage here.
So young.
I want to say something that one of my mentors told me before I actually went up to go work in Fort McMurray is the art of the possible and the vision that you have can be built by pragmatism and the solutions that you put into it. And I think for any young person who wants to get involved and truly make the world a better place, BC a better place, for you to hone your talents, whether it's in innovation, social development, environmental sustainability, this is the place to do it. Mineral exploration, mining, natural resource economy is the place to do it. And if you're wondering whether or not there is that opportunity, there is that inclusivity, I'm proof here that it is. And it's a phenomenal industry. It's a welcoming industry. And I can't wait to keep talking to different students in BC and Canada to show them why.
Heather, what's your message to young people about a future in mining?
I think about it all the time because I think it's the root of all of our social problems was the idea that, there was a 20th century natural resource economy, and now we were moving to a 21st knowledge economy, and that there wasn't room, there was no future in these kinds of jobs. And that is so, obviously patently not true. And when we think about the energy transition, if we think about friendshoring, if we think about our North American security, if we think about the future of our own economy, mining is going to be a big part of it. And I don't think we're going to have 5 times more mining to have the energy transition. And so I don't think we will ever have enough mining, to get to that point, which means that we will always need to do some more mining in Canada. We always need to, be better at it, produce more, find more deposits. This is not an industry that is winding down. It's really winding up. And for a young person to get in now, at this stage of the commodity cycle, at this stage of the energy transition, they have decades of growth and advancement in front of them. So it's a very exciting time. If I was 25, I'd go to engineering school for sure.
Jeff, what's your message to young people about the sector that you clearly are so fully embraced in?
Yeah, I'm obviously biased, but I love this sector, and I think what's really appealing about it is, and I'm not sure this is unique to young people, but I think people want increasingly they recognize that they want work that has purpose, and when I think about the big challenges, or in some cases opportunities that we as a society face, like whether it's dealing with climate change or some of these geopolitical tensions, or really local things like, Indigenous reconciliation or addressing legacy environmental impacts. Mining is a unique industry where you can actually do both. You can work on these global macro issues that, touch the geopolitics that are linked to addressing climate change, to hyper-local issues where you're, meeting with a chief, sometimes, in their community. And there's not that many sectors where you get to do both, and sometimes even on the same day. And, I think that's a very unique thing about mining. It makes for incredibly rewarding careers, and it just gives you a tremendous perspective because you get to meet with so many different people from so many different walks of life. And increasingly, to the comments that we were making earlier on diversity, it is a more diverse industry, and I think that's only going to really ramp up in the years ahead, which will make for much more rewarding careers for people.
Michael, we started with you. I'm going to ask you to wrap it up.
Thank you.
Because you're so good at that.
I think changing minds are changing minds. And I would welcome young people to come work in our sector. It's a sector that understands its shortcomings and is working hard to change. And it's a sector in transition. It's a sector that has fully realizes and understands the power of computing, of digital tools, and what we need to do to maintain an approach of continuous improvement. I think that's one of the core fundamental principles of mining is continuous improvement. Certainly is in British Columbia. So come join us you will be immersed in a exciting, fantastic industry that has tons of smart people who every day get up and think to themselves, how can we do better? How can we build a better mousetrap? How can we reduce our footprint? How can we increase our productivity? And ultimately, too, with an eye towards how can we improve our community? Because all the people who work in mines come from communities that are, if they're not doing fly in, fly out. And how can we do better with our partners and our suppliers? I think there's a real, kind of progressive consciousness within the sector. And I don't think you'll be disappointed.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you. When we started the panel tonight and the research that I was doing, I was thinking, oh my gosh, the challenges that are ahead of us are monumental. How can we do it? Well, the only way that we can do it, both Michael, you and Kirit quoted John Kennedy's Rice University moonshot speech. We do it because it's hard. But we don't give up, and the difficulty of it draws together the collective resources that we have as people to solve problems. And I think that because there is a commitment to addressing all of the issues of the green economy that we want to move towards and to preserve the environment as we do it, I come away tonight with faith that we can achieve that, because there are clearly extraordinary people who are putting their minds and their experiences to work in addressing this challenge. So thank you all for joining us on the panel. Now, you've got something that you want to, no, okay. You all have a mug. It's the coveted Conversations Live mug. Please take it with you as our thank you. It's our big stipend for you investing so much of your time in this evening, but please take it with you. And thank you once again to all of the people who helped make this happen, the sponsors. When you get a chance, go to our website. You've seen their logos on the screen all night long. Thank you very much. And then join us next month when we have an equally challenging topic. How do we ensure that we have food sustainability and that we can feed ourselves affordably going into the future? Thank you. Good night. Thank you for tuning into Conversations Live, an Oh Boy Productions program. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can find our previous and upcoming episodes at conversationslive.ca. You can also follow us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. Again, thank you. I'm Stuart McNish.